I'm contributing my bit in the education sector by working in the Center for Social Emotional Learning. I'm really grateful to be a part of the fomonomore family.
Hi everyone, I'm Vrinda Loiwal.
Join me for my 7-part series with fomonomore. See you there.
Down a little bit for our listeners.
Sure.
You said that 13.6% of upper primary children, upper primary is 6th to 8th grades, correct?
Yep.
So 13.6% of 6th to 8th graders who made grade appropriate transitions. Does that mean that they actually did get promoted to the next class?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So even these 6th to 7th and 8th graders were not able to read a grade 2 text?
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And 10% could not solve subtraction problems.
Yeah.
And subtraction, you would say, is usually taught in what grade?
I think grade 1. I would like to correct myself there. I think upper primary means from grade 3 to 5. Not 6 to 8.
I see. Okay. Okay. Fair point. So for grades 3 to 5, this is the state of affairs of their learning.
Yeah.
Wow. And what is the impact of this issue? Who all does it impact?
Well, I think it impacts students and parents on a very similar level. I mean, students, because of the no detention policy, which requires students to be passed up in 8th grade. So whether or it doesn't matter how students perform in the exams, they just have to, like, they will move on to the 8th till 8th, right? And they will have all the access to all the resources, notebooks, midday meals, uniforms, etc. So at that point, I think students do move up the grade, but like the report says, they do not really move up. Like the skills that is required for a grade 2 child, they're not developed in grade 2. So it just carries forward. And as we go forward, the text gets difficult. It gets less and less relatable as we go. And the concepts get very, very complex for the child to understand. So with increasing grade level and emotional maturity, the motivation of the child actually drops, because it's human tendency. If you try one thing 100 times and you fail 100 times, I think you will eventually believe that you're not cut out for this and you won't be able to do this. And in this situation, when there's no one to support you and guide you and to just push you forward, कि नहीं हो जाएगा, you can do this and you will do this, then you'll just give up.
I see. So we're talking about children who got promoted from one grade to the next grade to the next grade, but they have not developed the skills that they needed to master in that grade level. And so when they are promoted by the no detention policy, they are now faced with learning content of a more difficult level that they are not equipped to navigate.
Yeah.
Wow. And that must really impact the teachers also. So a fifth grade teacher has to maybe cover a fifth grade science chapter. But if children are not able to read, which is something they should be able to do by grade 2, what does that look like for the teacher then?
It's just because the class has different students with different reading levels. So I think, like, for the initial years, the teacher may work on those who are not able to read to just get them to read. But teachers just spend a lot of time in the classroom and a lot of time teaching to continue doing that, because if you, like I said, if you try 100 times and then you fail, and then also learning is not happening, you just tend to give up. So eventually teachers tend to focus on those who are able to do it, so that their work also gets done, and then they also have some, like there's also evidence that the work is getting done. But like, I wouldn't say this for all the teachers. I think there are some teachers who would definitely go, like, they would do everything they can to just focus on the reading levels as well. They would make the child read in the class, and they would do some activities and like make buddies in the class so that reading happens. But yeah, this is also a picture.
Wow. So when teachers see that children are not learning at the requisite level, no matter how much they push, if children are not able to catch up what they've lost in those early years of literacy and numeracy, then teachers also tend to give up after a point. And please tell us, how many students is one teacher addressing in a classroom?
I think 40 to 45. Like in the classrooms I taught, the students were ranging from 40 to 45. There are more than that in some classrooms as well.
Wow, that's a really large number for one teacher to teach, especially when they're at different learning levels.
Yeah.
Right, right. And how do parents respond when they see that their fifth grade child is still not able to read a second grade text? How do parents feel about that? Do they feel like we should just take our children out of school?
So I think based on where they come from, I mean, like parents don't generally ask the kids to drop out up until 8th grade because like there are a lot of facilities in school. Plus, it's like you don't have to pay fees also. Um, but like and also they're not very much aware of what it looks like for a second grade child or what it looks like for a fifth grade child and what is the difference and how can I help the child, right? The parents are busy and occupied and sometimes they're not even literate to help the child.
Right. So we're talking about parents who are busy, occupied, probably both parents are working, and oftentimes they themselves have not been literate.
Yeah.
So for them to be able to know, is my second grade child or is my fifth grade child on track is hard. It's hard for them to be able to decipher.
Yeah,
I see.
because the traditional way of teaching and learning and PTMs has always been about marks. So if a child is scoring good marks, then the child is good, and they're doing academically well, and everything is fine, and the parent is happy. But then if it's not good, like then if for example they have a very low score in their exams, then the child is not good enough, and the child uh, does not want to study or has behavioral issues, and ये तो घर पे पढ़ती नहीं है, and all these things then come up. So that is something that they understand. So they don't understand that the child's reading level is not up to the mark, but they do understand that the child is not studying.
I see. I see. Right. And if we sort of, zoom out and look into what is the predictable future if nothing is done to change the situation?
Well, I think it's pretty dark in that sense. I mean, if nothing changes, then consider a large part of Indian population, because like we have a large youth, a large part of Indian population to continue growing up with low motivation and a lack of self-belief and lack of persistence, that it will eventually lead them to give up on anything that they find difficult. If after 8th grade a child is dropping out saying that मुझसे अब पढ़ाई नहीं हो रही है, I can't do it anymore, then they can just give up on everything, thinking कि I can't do it anymore. And they would eventually end up working odd jobs, which also they will give up, which will eventually lead to unemployment. And unemployment leads to crime, then whatnot, and then rise in poverty. So, like this cycle that they were set to end, it will actually never break, and they will just continue to go through in it.
Wow. So what you're saying is that this problem of literacy, the ability to read, the ability to learn, if it's not gotten at the right time, at the right level, then it doesn't just mean that बच्चे को पढ़ना नहीं आता. It actually means he or she's going to drop out, do odd jobs, probably not be able to sustain those either, and will feed the unemployed sector and not be able to break out of that cycle of poverty. which is
Yeah.
much larger consequence than we imagine when we look at a grade 5 child. But that's where it all begins.
Yes. I heard somewhere that a child would never give up, or anyone for that matter, would never give up on anything that we find easy. If we are giving up on something, it means that we need help with it, or we may find it difficult, or we may need support with it. If we get that support, then we can move forward. We can figure out solutions, and then we can work out a way, and then we can go forward. But then if there's no one to guide us, to support us,
Yeah.
and every child needs different kind of support. Some need more and some need less. So it just depends.
But that's so beautifully put that in those challenging times, if we don't have support, how do we move forward? And so, are you? I mean, does that then bring us to the point that how do we support these children? And I'd actually love to hear how you supported children when you were at TFI as a teacher with these government schools.
Sure. So, like, I was honestly very unhappy with the kind of content that I was teaching. I used to teach English and I loved English. I grew up reading books and I just thought that they gave a lot of learning to me. But when I actually got to read the content, I was not very happy because it had very difficult words which we don't generally use in our vocabulary, and then it had stories from the Japanese culture which was not relatable for the kids or for me. Then there were those terminologies that the kids had to use, and imagine these are grade 7 kids who can't access that text. How do you expect them to understand what's there in that? Like, they're not able to read that text, and you're just assuming that a 7th grade child would understand something from a different culture and would understand it also and comprehend it. So I think I just had a lot of issues with that. Plus, my classroom had a lot of behavioral issues. Those kids, they were not in touch with their emotions, and like my co-fellow would cry in the class and go, and they wouldn't realize that they were a part of it. And like whenever I would ask them, like, what do you all need, they just say that if anyone behaves badly, just punish them. But I didn't want to do that. So I sort of worked out a few solutions, and I eventually thought I would teach them a novel which would cater to the behavioral issues that are happening in the classroom and would probably help us build a nice connection. It was for them to like I this book was called Tuesdays with Mori, which is about a book which is about a teacher and a child, like the student teacher relationship. So like the teacher is really old and is about to die, and the student grows up into the successful adult, but then is not in touch with his emotions. So when they meet, they're eventually like they meet and they talk about a lot of things like life, death, regrets, love, and all these things. So I thought that teaching a novel which puts you back in touch with your emotions would actually work for these kids. And so I just started.
This is very interesting. You're saying that in a classroom, and remind us, what grade level were you teaching?
I was teaching grade 7 kids who were at a reading level of 2,
Okay.
and to access the textbooks, they need to be at the reading level 3.
Wow. Okay. So you were teaching grade 7 students who were at the reading level of grade 2, and you didn't like the content that you had to teach them. You had to teach them about Japanese culture, which was completely unrelated to their context. So you decided to bring in a novel, and not just any novel, you brought in Tuesdays with Mori.
Yes.
And wow, so this is just amazing to me because that's that's an advanced novel. It's not a very easy to read story, or perhaps not very easy to understand. So talk to us a little bit about why, I mean, how and why did you choose that book?
So I also had the same apprehension. I was like, will 13-year-olds understand what entails in this novel, and will they understand the emotions and what connects two people like that? But I just thought that, okay, fine, I'll just give it a shot anyway. And I just told them, I shared my stories. I had to be a little vulnerable to them. I just asked them, like, has anyone ever told you that you can't do this or you're not good enough or anything? And they were like, yes. And I was like, okay, this has happened to me as well. So let's prove them all wrong and let's read this book. And then I just asked, will you read my favorite book? And they said yes. It was a unanimous yes, which came as a shock to me personally. Not as a shock, but as a surprise, yes. So I taught them the novel. We started off, we did those activities, and we discussed the quotes and what they meant. We discussed the context. We made character maps of both the characters, and we learned about ALS together. It was amazing. It was an amazing experience for me. Unfortunately, I had to switch schools and I couldn't finish the novel. But I think a few months later, when I went back to the class to meet them, they had finished reading the novel independently, which was another surprise for me because those kids, they couldn't even access their own textbook and they read a novel. Like, they didn't understand all of it, which is fine, but they read the entire novel, which was just amazing to me. Plus, the reading levels also shot up by the end of the year.
Wow. So I just have so much amazement right now, and I don't know where to begin. With these seventh grade students, you read the novel, you discussed quotes, you related it to your own lives. And what was that like?
It was a beautiful experience, to be very honest. I mean, um, with every passing lesson, students were understanding something, and I had to reiterate things, but then they were invested, they were listening to me. Everyone was listening to me, which is like, I think, a dream come true for a teacher. Because, like, my first day in that classroom, and they said that, Didi, please thoda zor se bolo, ya Didi, please, kal se glucose speaker aana because we can't hear you. And by the end of the year, this entire class was listening to me. And when I just asked them that, would you read this novel with me? They were like, yeah, we trust you. We will. So I think that's a pretty big, uh, it's a pretty successful job. I would call it successful. Um,
Yeah, and I'm just so struck by the magic that can happen when you believed in them and you related a novel to their lives. Do you have any examples of maybe one or two students' experiences, what they shared while you were reading that novel?
yeah, so I think so this class, they had very petty fights and they fought a lot. And they fought a lot and they like couldn't stay in their seats. But like, so whenever we would study about like whenever we would read about relationships and how we can just make our relationships more deep and engaging, I think that's when I would just take an example कि जैसे इन दोनों ने लड़ाई करी है, so what do you think would be a better way? Would they just keep saying things to each other, or would they just sit down and listen to each other and have a conversation and try to be kind to each other? So I think those shifts were also very evident in the classroom behavior eventually. I mean, I could see that happening. Like, students had those things in their mind when, like, they were mindful of their actions. Some were, yes. So it was evident with their actions. And this was a class who was not willing to study at all. So just to get them invested into something was a very big deal, which happened. So I think that is a big deal in itself.
It totally is. It totally is to get students genuinely interested. And I've been a teacher too. So I know that children are the most honest human beings on earth. They will like immediately give you feedback just through their actions or even non verbally. interest nahi hai to nahi hai. They're not going to fake it. Um, so yeah, to get children to be genuinely interested in a book that is above their level, might even have felt too challenging, is a very big deal. And so, first of all, I really want to congratulate you on having done that.
Thank
And this gives me a lot of hope as a teacher as well. So, also share with us, um, you couldn't complete the book, you had to be moved to a different classroom. But when you met them a few months later, they had finished the book on their own
you.
without teacher support.
Yes.
How did that happen? These were kids who were not even at grade 2 reading level.
I have no idea. I am just thinking that, like on the top of my head, I'm just thinking that, like when I left, I think my belief stayed with them, and they just thought that they could do it. So they did. They were interested in the novel, and they all had copies. So they had access also, and they were willing also. So they did it. They had a summer break, and I think they studied it. Like they read it during the summer break. So it was as surprising to me as it is to you.
Wow. And two things that you said therein, right? They had access to the resource that they need, and they had the belief that their teacher thought they were capable.
Yeah.
That's really big. Very cool. What did this experience leave you with?
It left me with a lot of hope, and I just felt like I could do anything. And if I just tell the kids that you can also do anything, then they can, and they probably will. So yeah, and I eventually did a few things after that also. Like after I moved to a new school, it was a very different context. But I thought that the context does not matter if you believe in a child's potential. So I eventually got them to learn about sustainable development goals, and I divided them into groups, and then asked, like, introduce them to some, like we just did a whole voting system out of which we chose 5 out of 17 goals, and then we made our teams. We named our teams according to different goals. For example, there was water warriors, then there was food fighters, then there was zero poverty group, like that. And all in those teams, they had to do research projects. They had to create surveys and do them. They had to read more about sustainable development goals, and particularly their goals. And like the idea was to get them to uh, pan out some action steps that they can take to solve the problems within the community. Uh, but that also couldn't happen. But they did make teams, and they did involve themselves into all those activities. And it just led to a lot of team building and a lot of awareness about sustainable development goals. And they were really, really mindful of using the resources, which is again a pretty big deal. Because I thought climate change is something that we genuinely need to focus on. And I just found a lot of value in my kids learning about sustainable development goals, and they did. So it was pretty cool like that. Then they also, like, whenever I give them some tasks to teach a particular topic in the classroom, they also try to relate it to the goal that they were dealing with, that they were studying about. So it became a lot more integrated and holistic in that sense.
Wow. So, can you give us an example of how classroom tasks became integrated with sustainable development goals? Just one example.
Sure. So, like, I'll just share how we went about voting for the top 5 sustainable goals that we wanted to work in. We were doing a civics chapter about how do we select the people in a parliament. And I just told them that this is how we vote, and then the majority gets selected, and then we voted for our top 5 goals. We just said that this is the goal. Every child got a chance to vote, and I just put tally marks bars around all the topics that were coming in, and then the result was right in front of us. So, like, this is how I also told them that the voting system is also very transparent, like that every person gets to vote. Every person who is eligible, they get to vote. and every vote is counted, and कोई double counting नहीं होती है because of the EVM. So yeah, so this way I think they just had a very small experience of how voting looks like, and what it results to eventually.
Wonderful. Wow. I love the idea of bringing voting and like an authentic democracy into the classroom. Cool. So, we started this conversation with a slightly bleak view of how the current government education system is. And that is fact. It is not in great shape at the moment. But you've also given us so much hope with your stories of how children have learned to read on their own when they've been presented with interesting assignments and with the teacher's belief that they're capable. So I'm also left feeling very hopeful. One thing I'd love to ask you, Shruti, is what is the way ahead for you personally, for your work as a teacher, as someone who is in the field of education? What is ahead for you? And what is ahead for the field? What do you recommend as next steps?
For me, I think it's all about making the kids feel safe enough to voice their opinions and be honest. It's about instilling belief in them and like genuinely believing in them and in their potential. These kids, the places they come from and the things that they experience, it's very important to tell them that they can do it despite everything. So I think just to make them feel heard and understood and safe is something that sort of became the very purpose of my life after that. One thing that I would recommend for everyone is to just give the kids a chance and be kind to them. I think it's very, very important for us to be kind to all these kids and in fact everyone. I think compassion has the power to build very, very strong relationships, and that strong relationship, if you give it to a child with hope and belief that, hey, I believe you can do this, I know that you have all those skills, then the child will also eventually believe in themselves and they will do it. Yeah. Give children a chance and be kind.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. And this has been such a great story. It's left me with such a big smile on my face and so much hope. So we at the Center for Social Emotional Learning also believe in the exact same thing that you do, which is that children need to know that they are capable and that they are inherently compassionate people, capable people, and they need to be given the confidence that they can achieve whatever they want. And as adults in the system, whether we're teachers or curriculum developers or pedagogy experts or we're launching a new edtech product, whatever we're doing, all of our processes need to be geared towards that. I think capability, compassion, and confidence.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing your story, and let's see if we have any questions or comments from our live audience. So we have a bunch of very encouraging comments. We have quite a few people saying this is a great way to connect with learners. So we have a bunch of very encouraging comments. Just a moment. I'm going to mute myself there. Yes, it's a great way to connect with your learners, being open about your own experiences. Another person has shared uh, how important it is to develop a connect with the content that you're teaching and help learners find meaning and relevance in the content. So this person has given kudos on building the connect with the content. I completely agree. A lot of people are very, very thrilled with your story and your journey, Shruti.
Thank you.
Okay, here's a question. When trying to implement a new innovation or an idea, what are some of your biggest challenges in seeing it come to life?
So I think one of the biggest challenge was to just plan all of these things out. I mean, planning Tuesdays with Mori took me around 3 to 4 months. It's not only about planning; it's about your daily teaching because it has to go on with the given curriculum. Like I didn't leave the curriculum and then teach a novel. I had to do the curriculum because that's what was gonna get them marks on the report card eventually. But I also wanted to teach something that I found value in, so I did it simultaneously, and it was very difficult with the daily teaching job and then procrastination. Also, I think it just took me 3 to 4 months to just finally start off with the novel, which is also why I couldn't finish it. Then the same thing goes with the sustainable development project. I mean, I did not know what I was doing was called project based learning. I got to know about it much later, but this was that. And luckily, I had the summer break to span out this project, and I just made timelines and deadlines. But again, school and students, everything is very uncertain over there. So things don't work out accordingly. So I think just the managing of the time is a very big challenge. But then again, um, if you find value in it, you will make time to do it. That is what matters. Also, I would really like to share that to instill the belief in students that you can do this, you have to believe in yourself, that you yourself can do this. Like I had to believe that I can execute a novel and I can do this. And similarly, I just had to believe that I can get my kids to do this and learn this, and it would be amazing. So, like, just believe in yourself as much as you believe in your kids. It's equally important.
And is that hard sometimes?
Yeah, of course. If kids are not interested, if you just spent months planning something, and if they're just not interested and they don't want to do it, then yeah, it is challenging. It's difficult to deal with it because then you think that I spent so much time on this and this is good for them. But if they're not interested, then it cannot do any good to them. It can't. So it's not in your control. Just try new stuff. Don't give up.
Yeah. No, I totally resonate with that. And I'm so glad you put it out there and in such beautiful words. When I was a teacher, a first year teacher especially, I struggled so much. I remember the first week being in tears on at least 3 days in the first week itself. I couldn't get the kids to pay attention. I couldn't get them to care about what I was saying. And it felt frustrating, to be an adult and to really be shown that, well, if we're not interested, we're not going to participate. And I remember that at that time I had a school principal who was extremely supportive and, said, it's okay to cry and it's okay to have these early teething pains when you're teaching. It's hard. It can be hard. And you have to believe in yourself and go out there and face the children again and do your best again and see if it works.
Yeah. That is what it is.
Yes, and it did. I think even for me, over time, I got better at learning about the children, about what they needed, about what they enjoyed, and I got better at learning about myself. And between those two, I think we found a decent bridge to have a flourishing learning relationship. Great. Let's see if there's another question. Yes. What impact of this lockdown do you anticipate on student learning, particularly in the communities that you've worked with? What is the impact that you're seeing, and what are the recommendations you have for parents and teachers?
Okay, so in the community that I'm teaching, it's very, it's not good. It's difficult. It has become way more difficult than it used to be in the classroom. Um, Thankfully, a lot of my students have access to internet, so I do get to talk to them and communicate things to them through WhatsApp. Uh, but at the same time, there's a lot that they're not familiar with. So, like, they're not familiar with Zoom, or they're not familiar with all these video calling apps that were that they were supposed to have the classes on, and then Zoom had this privacy issue, and then it got cancelled. So it has been very, very uncertain for kids. Plus, in the school that I teach, every teacher is sort of giving a weekly assignment to the kids. So, like, on Monday they get an English assignment, on Tuesday they get a Hindi assignment, and we're all giving them assignments for the week. So a student has more work than they used to, and because, like, the syllabus is being covered through this, and it's not an efficient way of learning because the progress is not being tracked properly. Even they can't track their own progress. They don't know if they're doing it right or wrong, and they will eventually get to know only when the school reopens. And we also don't know how the academic year is going to look like for the next year. In this case, challenges have only increased, but people are still working towards it. Like, I know people who are sending their kids learning packets, who are investing, like, especially for small kids, who are investing parents and asking them to track the child's progress through very simple ways. Um, like just giving stars. If you have done it, then stars कि कितना अच्छा काम किया and कैसे किया, and just to keep the child motivated. Something that we can do at this point for the kids is to just keep in touch with them and see if they are doing well. Just check in, make them feel heard. I do agree learning is very important, and this is a 5 month learning gap. It's huge. But at the same time, they still need to feel heard and safe. And if they feel safe with you, then please continue doing that along with learning. I think social and emotional safety is important at this point. Then we have to be really mindful and sensitive towards that. Having said that, because everything is just going digital, I introduced my kids to Gmail, and I had them collect their email addresses, and I'm giving them assignments on Google Forms so that they get used to the idea of using all of these things and they don't feel this unfamiliar and overwhelmed when schools reopen and teachers still continue using these platforms.
Got it. Wow. And I think we have time for one last question. This is, did your students come back with book recommendations to you?
No, that didn't happen.
All right. Maybe that's for a next time then. Lastly, Shruti, if you would just introduce yourself one more time for people who could join in only a bit late. That's been a question. So please.
Yay. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Shruti. I graduated from Delhi University in philosophy, after which I did my fellowship in Teach for India for 2 years, where I taught two different classrooms in like two different schools in two different communities. And I was talking about how my experience was teaching in a low-income government school, and what were the challenges that I faced, and what was the problem that I identified that I eventually set out to solve, even after my fellowship, through Center for Social Emotional Learning.
Fabulous. So, yeah, and it is so great to have you, Shruti. I'm Vrinda. I'm the founder of Center for Social Emotional Learning. And believe me, some of the stories Shruti shared today I was not aware of either. And I truly do feel enriched by your learnings and what you're sharing. And I'm so thrilled to have someone on board this amazing, ambitious mission of making learning joyful and relevant for students all over. Cannot be more thrilled to have you on board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.